When you realize that companies are evil. I was the best vendor in a huge sales department. Was laid off by my manager without any explanation. Immediately after he hired his girlfriend in my exact position. I went to HR to talk about it because it's no sense to lay off someone without reason. Especially the top performer. I also told them about his girlfriend. They didn't help at all and didn't give explanations. I was furious because due to mismanagement I lost a job that I liked and in which I was so good and no one helped me. I realized in that moment that most companies are simply evil. We are not people for them. Just numbers. Sometimes they don't even care about profit. They are simply evil. I'm 54. My first job at 16 was at Taco Time. I got called in and fired for talking to the customers too much when sweeping the restaurant. As I was leaving, a coworker took me aside and said it wasn't my fault. The manager wanted to hire a friend and had to let someone go. Next job at Denny's. I was tarted up in a sexy little dress and sent around to give customers Mother Butler pie samples at their tables. I was sexually harassed so much during that job and no one ever did anything about it. Last corporate job I had a manager tried to write me up for something he did and I refused to sign it and they fired me. So I guess I was 16. When I worked for a department store chain that no longer exists because they went bankrupt. I was a payroll specialist and having to tell hard-working people that I worked alongside in my previous position at this company, you did very well this year. Your raise will be 15 cents, and watch the life leave their eyes. HR was a real awakening for me. I worked in the training department for a large company. I had trained most of the 400+ employees on the sales side of the call center. I was friends with most of these folks and we had worked together for a few years. I was called into a meeting and told to sign a non-disclosure agreement before the meeting could continue. I signed it and was then informed that the call center would be outsourced and all of the employees laid off. I would spend the next few months training the outsource employees. If I said a word to anyone I would be fired and other things were threatened. I was young and naive and did as I was told. On the day the layoff were announced, all of my friends quickly realized that I knew it was coming and had said nothing. I lost a lot of friends and a bit of my soul in that one. The company let me go in another layoff 2 years later. I was 6 months shy of a 2-month paid sabbatical. My first job, 2005, a billion-dollar retail giant that would scream at you for 30 minutes for 5 minutes of overtime, but would waste millions of dollars in product that was pushed onto the stores then clearanced 2 months later because it didn't sell. I worked at Best Buy in the early 2000s, when Black Friday in-person sales were still a big thing. Our goal was $1 million in sales for the day for that single store. We busted our asses and got the $1 million that day. I looked around and realized we achieved this with 30 associates on the floor making $11 per hour each. They paid us a total of $2,600 in labor to reach $1 million in sales. What a slap in the face when they flaunt it the way they do. When I started in my long-term job as a 22-year-old, there was an older man working there and he had been there for many years. He was married, with kids etc. Not long after I started, there was a mix-up with wage slips and I received his in my envelope. I was earning considerably more than him, even though I was only after starting in the place. This was a small family business. And the guy was just being taken advantage of as he would never ask for anything. Even if we had done overtime and didn't get paid for it, he would ask me to say it to them as then they would realize that he hadn't been paid for it either. I worked there for many years, but regularly got decent increases. Mostly by saying that I had received other offers though. The way they treated other long-serving staff was jarring. Letting them go despite years of service, and I foolishly thought that it would be different for me. Until it was my turn. When it was more convenient to get rid of me, my position suddenly became redundant after I complained about ongoing harassment and bullying. 6 months after I was let go, they replaced part of my role as that is the legal time that they could not replace me, or the redundancy would have been seen for what it was. I know what you're saying, Op, but we really gotta get away from this idea of companies are evil. Companies don't exist, they're just a group of people working together. We shouldn't let executives hide behind some abstract concept. It's not about what the company wants, when real human beings are the ones making these decisions. After I got fired for nonsense a few times in my youth, my hard work was never enough, so I just was good to my people, but the company can kick rocks. Because they don't see anyone as anything other than a number. No raises this year, we only made $3 billion profit. I got hired at like age 19 for $8 more an hour than the dude that's been there for 40 years. He asked for a raise after figuring that out, and they gave him $2 more. A year later the plant cut production by half, so half the plant was laid off. He was the first one to go. Backquote, immediately after he hired his girlfriend in my exact position. Backquote. This is the reason. Nothing more. Than because of you and your colleagues. He's one hell of a manager. So he's highly regarded by the upper management and probably have friends in HR. There is no mismanagement here. However, it will. If his GF doesn't reach the goals they surely ask him to pursue. Because unless it's his company, he will have to justify why. If you though one bit, that working in a sales DPT of a big company was a safe spot and that companies are loyal, I'm sorry for you, because it won't be the last time. Retail is very toxic. As someone who still works there, specifically a grocery store bakery, my manager will get pissed at the smallest things, and I was always micromanaged by the produce manager. Never mind, I have 4 years working experience, including 2 years solo during the pandemic. It's caused so much mental stress that I'm sure I need some kind of therapy. But neither my doctor or parents don't think I'm serious. So they just opted to up my meds instead, even when I said no. When I first started working alone, they wanted me to work full-time for 6 days a week for 8 hours. I agreed, but only if I could learn to do cakes. They agreed that I could once we got more help. Once we did, no matter how much I asked or dropped hints, they taught everyone but me. So I went back to part-time, and I do my best to get done early Sundays because they're trying to waste my Sunday mornings by standing around. Like, dude, if I'm done, I'm leaving. Not everyone wants to waste their life in retail. I want time to do the things I love, not constantly get taken advantage of. And if I have to take matters into my own hands, then fine, I will. I guess like 9 years old just from reading basic history. I didn't pick up communist books until like 13, but by then it was already quite obvious. I already knew that landlords were evil because when I was 9 or so we got kicked out of our house. 'Cause the landlord wanted his daughter to live there instead. It wasn't a stretch to guess that any boss or company owner was evil. During the pandemic, the company I worked for furloughed much of the staff but kept tight-lipped about if we were going to have jobs. Before the pandemic, this was a company where they were making money hand over fist, had 30+ offices and had generous overtime. But that all came to a screeching halt when the pandemic came. They called me into the office for product maintenance and other tasks a few days here and there, with the COO personally thanking me for coming in. 2 months later they stopped paying our health benefits and continued to play coy about our future. Tried looking for what else was out there as a backup plan. But hiring was frozen everywhere. 2 months after that, I received my termination via mail, signed by the COO. A week prior to that, on Father Day of all days, I found out my wife and I were expecting our first child. That one time where my supervisor vandalized my car and the company covered for him, claiming they didn't see anything in the school's security camera recording. I'm sorry to hear that, op. We all need to rise up. When you realize that if a CEO has an option to cause harm but make more money, he has to. Otherwise he could be sued and lose his job for not doing everything he can to create value for the shareholders. When I was being mentored to run a company, but I wouldn't call it evil. It's the zeitgeist of capitalist realism that's forced on us. My first job, I worked in newspaper advertising. I only had the job because the main holding corp paper fired all of the ad people at the home paper offices and routed everything via a call center to young people they paid less than half as much. And we covered multiple papers versus just one. It was a slow process and we had to work with the home ad offices in each city on certain kinds of ads. It was awkward and terrible. When text messages went from being free to like 0.10 or 0.25 per message, knowing that the messages, at the time, not sure how it is now, pigged back on other signals already being sent, costing them almost nothing. I was a Republican in college. Really opened my eyes to capitalisms.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.